So we're going to take a look at the bank adjustments now. So we'll see in the past few years that bank adjustments have actually become very, very, very popular. And up until 2020, they never actually appeared in sole trader final accounts. And then they came up in the last two sole trader final accounts then, so 2020, 2021. So we can see them in any type of account that that might come up. All right, so we need to be ready for it. Now, it looks very, it looks like a lot of work, all right? And it does, it looks very daunting, but we'll see how we can do it in a way that we'll never get the bank figure wrong again. So here's the 2021 question 1A question, all right? And you see here, it is adjustment number 7. So it says the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the business bank account. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2020 has arrived showing an overdraft of €29,200. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a credit transfer for €1,800 had been received on the 31st of the 12th, 2020 in respect of a debt of €2,500 previously written off as bad. The debtor has agreed to pay the remainder within 2 months. No entry was made in the books to record this transaction. Number 2, a cheque for $18,700 issued to a supplier had been returned. This had not been entered in the books. A cheque for advertising, then number 4, $17,200 has not been presented for payment. So the issue here is that the bookkeeper has a bank figure that he or she knows, okay, and that's based on all of the accounts that she's kept here, and then the bank has their figure based on all the information that they have. So the bookkeeper knows about some things that the bank doesn't, and vice versa. Okay, so a bookkeeper might know that he or she has given a cheque to somebody and they just haven't cashed it yet. And then the bank might know about a payment that's just recently come in and the bookkeeper doesn't know about that yet, or a direct debit that's gone out or something like that. So if you draw out this table in your workings, you should never get the bank figure incorrect again. So you write out the number of adjustments here. So we've 4 adjustments in that. We'll have the bookkeeper's bank figure from the trial balance, and then we will have AIB's bank statement figure. So I'm just going to say AIB so that you'll recognise that that is the bank's figure. And then you have a column here for what other accounts are affected. By the time you get down to the bottom here, we should have reconciled our bank figures. They should be the exact same figure then. So let's get started with this one. So we take the bookkeeper's bank figure from the trial balance, 52,100, and it's on the credit side, so that means that that is a bank overdraft. In the adjustment, it says that the bank statement, so if you imagine AIB, their overdraft figure is €29,200 there. Now, so comparison of the bank account and the bank statement reveal the following discrepancies. So number 1, a credit transfer of $1,800 had been received on the 31st of the 12th, 2020 in respect of a debt of $2,500 previously written off as bad. The debtor has agreed to pay the remainder within 2 months. No entry was made in the books to record this transaction. Right, so a credit transfer was paid directly into the bank, so into AIB. So AIB should know about that. So we shouldn't have to shouldn't impact AIB's figure, but it will impact the bookkeeper because they didn't know about that yet, right? So no entry was made in the books to record this transaction, so we need to record the transaction then. So what will happen to the bookkeeper's overdraft figure when 1,800 comes into the bank? It will reduce the overdraft figure, so we will minus the 1,800 there. Then what we'll do is we'll say, well, we received 1,800 from the debtor that was previously written off as bad. They've agreed to pay us the remainder within 2 months. So therefore, the amount that they owe us within the next 2 months is 700. So we will add 700 back to the debtor. And also the 2,500, the total amount was previously written off as bad. Okay, so what that means is it is bad debts recovered. So that is pretty good news there. So bad debts recovered is an income, and we will put it into add operating income in the trading profit and loss. Next, we'll move on to number 2. A cheque for 18,700 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger, as 17,800. Okay, so there was a mistake. Who made the mistake? The bookkeeper made the mistake. All right, so we'll have a look at it here. What should the bookkeeper have done? So the bookkeeper should have said 18,700 came out of the bank. So that's money out there on the credit side of the bank. And they should have said that the creditor, the liability creditor, would reduce by 18,700 on the debit side. Now, what happened by mistake was that it went in as 17,800, all right, instead of 18,700. So 17,800 comes out of the bank, and then 17,800 was reduced in the creditor. But obviously, as you know, that's not enough. It should have been 18,700, but they only put in 17,800. So how do we fix that then? So to fix it, we will put another 900 on the credit side of the bank, which is money coming out of the bank, and we will take another 900 away from creditor. So it's not going to affect the bank. The bank's never going to know that this bookkeeper here made a mistake in her accounts, nor will they care. But the bookkeeper needs to adjust these two accounts, the bank and the creditor. So the bank, we're going to minus the bank here, which means that that overdraft will be added to. So we add 900 euro there. And then the creditor, we minus 900 euro in the creditor. So that's that done. Number 3, a cheque for 4,800 issued to a supplier had been returned. This had not been entered in the books. Okay, so it hadn't been entered in the books. Whose books? The bookkeeper's book. There will be no adjustment to the bank here, so it's just the bookkeeper needs to adjust for this. So a cheque issued to a supplier had been returned. So be returned because for whatever reason, maybe there was no money in their account. It could be the post returned it. However, the cheque just came back to the business. Whatever it is, they need to record then that the money that they had paid out of the bank to pay the creditor is now technically, we need to record it coming back into the bank. So it will reduce the bank overdraft, and it will also increase the creditor. So we owe the creditor 4,800 again. So we would credit the creditor and debit the bank. So debiting the bank in this case would reduce the bank overdraft. Then lastly, a cheque for advertising 17,200 has not been presented for payment. So it hasn't been presented for payment. So imagine the bookkeeper here wrote a cheque to an advertising company for 17,200, and that advertising company just has not brought that into the bank, okay, and cashed it or whatever. So this bookkeeper, they've got nothing to do because it doesn't say he or she didn't record it in their accounts or anything like that. So we have to assume they did record it in the accounts. But what will happen in AIB then, when they know that this has been presented for payment, we will add 17,200 to the overdraft, and that will be 46,400 overdraft in both the bank accounts. So we have the same bank account figure at the end of reconciling them both. If you do not get this final bank figure to equal, you have made a mistake somewhere in the accounts. And more often than not, you might have plussed instead of minused, minus instead of plussed, or you might have put it in the wrong place. But you need to figure it out. You need to work it out, because at the end of the day, at the end of this adjustment, your bank figures should equal. So let's have a look and see how we would put this into the account. So we'll do the bank first. So the bookkeeper's bank figure 52,100 minus the 18 here, plus the 900 minus the 48, and we've got our 464. Okay. Then we have to enter the other things from what other accounts are affected. We've got debtor plus 700. We've got bad debts recovered. That's going to go into add operating income in the trading profit and loss. And then we have the creditor minus 900 and then plus 4,800. So that is the 2021 bank adjustment done there. Then we'll move on to 2021, the manufacturing account question, and there was a bank adjustment here. So people who didn't know the bank adjustment this year, you know, they just weren't going to get it right because it appeared in both sole trader and manufacturing account. So part 5. So it says the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's own records. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2020 had arrived showing a balance of €148,300. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1. A cheque for €2,000 received from a debtor has been dishonoured. This has not been entered in the books. Number 2. A cheque for €7,500 received from a debtor had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger as €5,700. And number 3. A cheque of €2,500 issued to a creditor has not been presented for payment. Okay, so a lot going on there. And again, the bookkeeper's bank figure and the bank's bank figure are completely different. So we need to suss out what do we need to do to get them to equal at the bottom here. So let's take a look at this. So we have here in the trial balance that the bank's bank figure is 146 on the credit side. So that is a positive bank figure of 146,000. Here we have a balance of 148,300. So that's a positive figure there as well. So 3 discrepancies here. They were a bit easier than the sole trader final account ones. So number 1, a cheque for 2,000 received from a debtor has been dishonoured. This has not been entered in the books. Who knows that it's been dishonoured? The bank knows that it's been dishonoured, so the bank figure doesn't have to be touched. Now, if a cheque was dishonoured from a debtor sent us a cheque, and what the bookkeeper would have done, they would have added the 2,000 to the bank figure. But if the cheque has bounced, it's been dishonoured, all right? The debtor didn't have enough money in their account. Basically, that's going to reduce the positive bank figure here. And what we'll have to do to the debtor is we will have to add €2,000 to the debtor figure in the balance sheet. So that's part 1 done. Part 2 then, a cheque for 7,500 received from a debtor had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger as 5,700. So basically, it was the bookkeeper that messed up there. The bank didn't know about this hiccup, nor do they care, and it won't affect their figure whatsoever. So a cheque for 7,500 received from a debtor, okay, had been entered incorrectly. So the bookkeeper put it in incorrectly. So let's see what should have happened here. If the bookkeeper received a cheque for 7,500 from the debtor, they should have debited the bank 7,500 and they should have credited the debtor 7,500 because they no longer owe the business that money. What they did by mistake though, they just messed up the figures and they put 5,700 in instead of 7,500 into the correct accounts. So how do we fix this? Well, we'll have to add 1,800 to this 5,700 in order to get us up to 7,500 there. So we need to add 1,800 to the bookkeeper's bank figure, and we need to subtract 1,800 from the debtor there. And just to let you know, you're not going to get this right if you don't use the green, the red and the blue. Well, you might get it right, but a lot of times people don't use it. They might make a mistake. So you're very less likely to make a mistake if you use that method there. Then the last one, it says a cheque of 2,500 issued to a creditor has not been presented for payment. So the bookkeeper gave a cheque to a creditor, okay, and the creditor just hasn't gone into the bank and lodged it yet. So who doesn't know about that? Well, it's the bank that doesn't know about that. The bookkeeper has nothing to do. Doesn't say they haven't recorded or anything like that. So the bookkeeper has nothing to do. When the bank realises that a cheque has been issued to a creditor, this bank figure will reduce by 2,500. Now, hopefully, these two figures will now equal when we tot them up, and they do. So that is a positive 145,800. And again, if these don't equal, you have gone wrong somewhere. So this is how this is going to look in the books. The bank current asset here, 146 minus 2 plus 8 is 145,800. And then the debtor, we add the 2,000 and we minus the 1,800. So it was a little bit easier than the sole trader question that year. So now moving on to the 2020 question. So there's the bank adjustment there. Again, it looks absolutely huge compared to all the other adjustments, but as you know, it's not that difficult. So adjustment number 7. The figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the business bank account. However, a bank statement dated 31st of the 12th, 2019 has arrived showing an overdraft of €32,000. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. So number 1, a credit transfer of €1,000 had been received on the 31st of the 12th, 2019 in respect of a debt of €1,500 previously written off as bad. The debtor has agreed to pay the remainder within 2 months. No entry was made in the books to record this transaction. Number 2, a cheque for €16,500 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger, as €15,600. Number 3, a cheque for €2,500 issued to a supplier had been returned. This had not been entered in the books. And number 4, a cheque for advertising €14,200 has not been presented for payment. Okay, so let's get started. So again, the bookkeeper's bank figure and AIB's bank figure completely different, and we need to adjust them so that we get the same one at the end of the day. So looking at the trial balance there, the bank figure is 48,800 and it's in overdraft because it's on the credit side, and then the bank statement figure, AIB's statement figure, is 32,000 overdraft. So quite a huge difference there. So hopefully when we've accounted for all these, we will have the same at the end. So looking at the first one, a credit transfer for 1,000 had been received on the 31st of the 12th, 2019 in respect of a debt of 1,500 previously written off as bad. The debtor has agreed to pay the remainder within 2 months. No entry was made in the books to record this transaction. Okay, so this is great news. This is bad debt recovered, and we're happy about this situation. It was a bad debt previously written off, the debtor went bankrupt or whatever it might be, and now they're back in business. They want to give us some of the money they previously owed us. So happy days. So the credit transfer was paid directly into AIB. So AIB have they know about this. They don't have to adjust this. If a credit transfer of 1,000 came into the bank, that would reduce the bookkeeper's bank overdraft figure. So it was in respect of a debt of 1,500 previously written off as bad, and the debtor is going to pay the remainder. So the debtor is going to increase by €500, and then you've got bad debts recovered, €1,500, and that is going to go into add operating income in the trading profit and loss. Number 2 there, we have a cheque for 16,500 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger as 15,600. Okay, so the bookkeeper completely messed up here, right? So the 2 accounts here should be bank and creditor. So if they paid a cheque to the creditor, it would reduce the amount in the bank account, and the debt to the creditor, the liability to the creditor, would reduce by 16,500. Now, unfortunately, the bookkeeper was a bit off that day that they were recording it, and they did a mistake. They just swapped their figures around by mistake. They entered it as a cheque for 15,600. So how do we fix it? We need to add another 900 to this 15,600 to get to where we want to be here. Okay, so we have nothing in AIB's statement. Okay, that won't affect that at all. Bookkeeper made the mistake. It needs to be fixed in her books. So when we are minusing from the bank, that's going to increase the bank overdraft. So we'll add that to the bank overdraft. And then the creditor is going to be reduced in the balance sheet under creditors minus 1 year. Number 3, a cheque for 2,500 issued to a supplier had been returned. This had not been entered in the books. Okay, so again, same as the last one, cheque to a creditor had been returned to the business. So the bookkeeper's going to have to get on to the creditor again and arrange payment in some other way, or maybe send another cheque. So when the check issued to the supplier had been recorded by the bookkeeper, the bank would have been credited and the creditor would have been debited. So we would have minused from the creditor and minused from the bank. But now we have to do the opposite. So we have to show that it is 2,500 coming into the bank, which is going to reduce the bank overdraft figure. And the creditor is going to be added 2,500 to that because you owe them that 2,500 again. Then number 4, a check for advertising 14,200 has not been presented for payment. So who doesn't know that? It's the bank that does not know that. Okay, so the bank doesn't know that. Doesn't say the bookkeeper hasn't entered it in their books, so we have nothing to do here. But when the check for advertising is presented for payment, that bank overdraft figure is going to increase by 14,200. So at the end of the day, we have 46,200 overdraft in both the bookkeeper's bank figure and AIB's bank figure. So we're all good here. So how's it going to look then? Well, our overdraft is going to be 48,800 minus 1,000 plus 900 minus 25. The debtor is going to be increased by 500. Bad debts recovered in the ad operating income in the TPL is going to be €1,500. And then creditors, we're going to minus 900 and we're going to add 2,500. And that's how that's going to look there. So that's the 2020 question. Right, so 2019 then. So this was a company account. So the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the company's own records. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2018 has arrived showing an overdraft of €62,280. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a cheque received from a debtor for 5,600 had been dishonoured by the bank. This debtor had been declared bankrupt and had made a credit transfer for a first and final payment of 30 cents for every €1 owed. Number 2, a direct debit to a local refuse company for €860 had not been recorded in the company's books. And number 3, a cheque for fees of 2,500 issued to a director had not been presented for payment by the 31st of the 12th, 2018. Okay, so let's get started. So the bookkeeper's bank figure from the trial balance was 60,000 on the credit side of the trial balance, which means 60,000 overdraft. And here it was an overdraft of 62,280. Now, number 1, the cheque received from a debtor for 5,600 had been dishonoured by the bank. This debtor had been declared bankrupt and had made a credit transfer for a first and final payment of 30 cents for every €1 owed. Okay, so there's a good bit going on here. It was dishonoured by the bank knows about it, the bank doesn't need to do anything. Now, if the cheque was received from the debtor has been dishonoured, that is going to be adding to the overdraft. So if it was dishonoured, just the money didn't come out, we didn't get the money, we couldn't cash the cheque, so it's going to increase our overdraft there because the bookkeeper had recorded that we received 5,600, which reduced the overdraft previously. Now, then we got a credit transfer for our first and final payment of 30 cents for every €1 owed. So 30 cents in the euro we got paid into the bank. So 30 cents for every one of these euros we received. So 30% of 5,600 is 1,680 that we got paid into the bank, which reduces our overdraft. Now, what other accounts are affected here then? So the debtor, we have to add the 5,600 back to them because they now owe us the 5,600 after the cheque was dishonoured. But then we're going to minus the 1,680 that they paid us through credit transfer, and then we have to minus the 3,920 that is written off as a bad debt. So that's the 70 cents in every euro that they're not going to get. So that's going to be bad debts written off, 3,920 there, and that is going to go in, sorry, that shouldn't say ad operating income, that should say TPL under S&D expenses. So S&D expenses. Now, number 2, a direct debit to a local refuse company for €860 had not been recorded in the company's books. Okay, so hadn't been recorded in the bookkeeper's books, didn't affect the AIB's bank figure at all. If 860 came out of the company's bank account, that is going to increase the overdraft here. And then a refuse company, so that's just a charge for bins and stuff, so just add that to salaries and general expenses. Add 860 to the TPL admin expenses. And then number 3, a cheque for fees of 2,500 issued to a director had not been presented for payment by the 31st of the 12th, 2018. So basically the bookkeeper gave a cheque to somebody, doesn't say that they didn't record it anywhere, it just hasn't happened in the bank yet. But when it happens in the bank, when a director goes in with the 2,500 cheque, that is going to increase the bank overdraft figure according to AIB of 62,280. Now hopefully our bank figures will equal now, and they do at €64,780 overdraft in both there. Now, how's this going to look in the accounts? So we have in the overdraft in the bank, we have the bank 60,000 plus 56 minus 1680 plus 680, so that's that done. Then we have the debtor plus 56 minus 1680 minus 3920. Then we have bad debts written off, so I'm glad I put it in the right place. It's TPL selling and distribution, that shouldn't say AOI there, so 3920 here. And then salaries and general expenses, we will add to the trial balance figure 860 charge for the bins. Okay, 2018 then came up. Alright, so we're noticing it's coming up every single year here recently. So number 4, the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's records. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2017 shows an overdraft of 33,300. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a cheque for €1,000 had been lodged directly into the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor in respect of a debt previously written off. This represented €40 of the original debt, and the debtor has undertaken to pay the remainder in January 2018. Number 2, rent due 31st of the 12th, 2017 was paid directly into the firm's bank account. And number 3, a cheque of 6,300 issued to a supplier had not been presented for payment. So let's take a look at what we need to do here. So we've got 43,600 in the overdraft there. Then we've got 33,300 in the AIB bank statement. And so we need to get them to equal. So number 1, a cheque for €1,000 had been lodged directly into the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor in respect of a debt previously written off. This represented 40% of the original debt, and the debtor has undertaken to repay the remainder in January 2018. Okay, so nothing went into the AIB, nothing goes into the AIB bank statement figure because they know about it. The cheque was lodged directly into the firm's bank account. Okay, so we don't do anything there. Then we have a cheque for 1,000. If that was lodged into the firm's bank account, that would reduce the overdraft figure there of 1,000. So then, this represented 40% of the original debt, and the debtor has undertaken to repay the remainder in January 2018. So 1,000 is 40% of what the debt that was written off by the debtor. So 60% is 1,500, which we will add to the debtor's figure there in the current assets. Then bad debts recovered is going to be the entire amount, 2,500. So if we think of this with regards to T accounts, 1,000 debited in the bank account, debtors 1,500 debited in the debtor account. Bad debts recovered, revenue, we credit that 2,500. So your debits and credits equal there. Number 2, rent due 31st of the 12th, 2017 was paid directly into the firm's bank account. So we have here, we have rent to the 30th of the 9th, 2017, 9,000 on the credit side. So rent 30th of the 9th, 2017, 9,000 credit side. That means rent received. Rent received for the first 9 months of the year, 9,000. So that means that is €1,000 per month. Okay, so any rent due by the end of the year paid directly into the firm's bank account, that is €3,000 there. So it was paid directly into the firm's bank account. AIB knew that because it was paid directly into them, but the bookkeeper needs to adjust that now. That's going to reduce their overdraft figure by 3,000, and then we're going to have to record the rent received 3,000. So rent received, add 3,000, and that is going to go into the TPL in add operating income. Then number 3, a cheque for 6,300 issued to a supplier had not been presented for payment. So the bookkeeper gave the supplier that cheque, but the supplier just hasn't gone into the bank and lodged it. Okay, so when the supplier does go into the bank and lodge it, what's going to happen to that overdraft figure? It is going to increase by 6,300. So we have to add the 6,300 there. So we tot these all up and we get 39,600 overdraft in both of the bank figures. So how is this going to look then? So we've got the bank 43,600 minus 1,000 minus 3,000, and then we've got debtors plus 1,500. We've got bad debts recovered 2,500 in the add operating income, and then we have rent received plus 3,000 in the add operating income as well. So plus 3,000 there, and that's that one. Now 2017 was sole trader, no bank adjustment came up. As I said, bank adjustment first came up in sole traders in 2020. So in 2016 in Ryan Limited manufacturing account we have a bank adjustment here. So let's take a read. So the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's records. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2015 had arrived showing an overdraft of 36,300. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a cheque for €800 received from a debtor has been dishonoured. This has not been entered in the books. Number 2, rent of 5,100 for 6 months ending 30th of the 4th, 2016 was paid directly into the firm's bank account. And number 3, a cheque of €2,000 issued to a supplier had not been presented for payment. Okay, so let's take a look. So the bookkeeper's bank figure was 42,600 on the credit side, so that is an overdraft. AIB's bank figure on their bank statement showed 36,300 overdraft. So we need to get these figures to be the same down below. So number 1, a cheque for €800 received from a debtor has been dishonoured. This has not been entered in the books. Okay, so a cheque for 800 received from a debtor was dishonoured. So the debtor sent them a cheque, okay, and then cheque for the debtor has been dishonoured. But what happened, the bookkeeper, was they recorded that the cheque came into the bank account. We need to unwind it now. What does dishonoured mean? Dishonoured means the debtor didn't have it in their account to pay for it. Okay, so the bank knows that it was dishonoured. We've nothing to do in the bank here. But when the cheque was dishonoured, that's going to add to the overdraft, because when the cheque was recorded, it reduced the overdraft. So now we have to show that it was dishonoured, so it'll add to the overdraft. And then we need to show that the debtor needs to be increased by €800. Number 2 then, rent of 5,100 for 6 months ending 30th of the 4th, 2016 was paid directly into the firm's bank account. Okay, paid directly into the firm's bank account. The bank knew about that, the bookkeeper didn't. So we have to record it in the bookkeeper. So when they receive money, 5,100 into the bank account, that is going to reduce the overdraft figure of 42,600. And then we need to record it. We need to record the rent received. So the rent, 5,100, was for 6 months ending 30th of the 4th, 2016. We are doing the books for 2015. So 4 of those months are for the next year. That means 2 of them were for this year. So we have to split that 5,100 up into rent for 2 months for this year, rent received 2 months for this year, and rent receivable prepaid 4 months for next year. So we've got rent received, add 1,700 in add operating income there, and then we've got rent receivable prepaid, add 3,400, and that goes into creditors minus 1 year. Then number 3, a cheque of €2,000 issued to a supplier had not been presented for payment. So again, the bookkeeper knows about this. They wrote the cheque, okay, so they won't, they have entered it. They don't need to enter it again. Doesn't say they made a mistake or anything like that. So we're good in the bookkeeper's accounts. But when the supplier lodges that cheque into the bank, it's going to increase that overdraft by €2,000. So overall then we have the same bank figure, €38,300 overdraft in both of them. And that is that adjustment done. So we have here bank 42,600 plus 800 minus 51, that's 38,300. That's the bank done. Then to the debtor we'll add 800, and then we'll put rent received for the 2 months of the year, 1,700, into add operating income in the TPL, and then rent receivable prepaid is 3,400. That's 4 of the 6 months. So rent receivable prepaid, if a business gets rent receivable prepaid, they owe the tenant 4 months rent, 4 months use of the space. So that is a liability there. So that is that one done. Now 2015 Melba, a company account. So here we have in note 7, it says the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's bank account. However, a bank statement dated 31st of the 12th, 2014 has arrived showing an overdraft of €46,690. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, 2 months investment income had been received directly into the bank. Number 2, a payment from a liquidator was received directly into the bank. This represented a first and final payment of 25 cents in the euro in respect of a debt of €4,000. And then number 3, a cheque issued to an advertising firm for €560 had not been presented for payment by the 31st of the 12th, 2014. Okay, so here we go. So we've got, in the trial balance, we have the bookkeeper's bank figure on the credit side, which means that is an overdraft. The bank statement, so AIB bank statement, shows an overdraft of 46,690. So the comparison has revealed the following discrepancies. So 2 months investment income was paid directly into the bank. So we look for the investments, see how much they are. The 350,000 investments by 3% by 2 months, that works out to be 1,750. It was paid directly into the bank, so AIB already know about this. They don't need to be, their bank figure doesn't need to be adjusted. When 1,750 gets paid into the bank, that is going to reduce the bank overdraft figure there. And we'll have to record that then as investment income received. So that's going to help us determine how much investment income is due at the end of the year. So you'll have the investment income for the year minus 1,750, and that will be recorded in the balance sheet in the current assets. Note 2, a payment from a liquidator was received directly into the bank. This represented a first and final payment of 25 cents in the euro in respect of a debt of €4,000. Okay, so the bank knew about this because it was received directly into the bank. And then this represented a first and final payment of 25 cents in the euro in respect of a debt of €4,000. So that means that the bank, the business, received a check, or sorry, was received into the bank received €1,000. If they received 1,000 into the bank, that's going to reduce the bank overdraft by €1,000 there. Then what will happen is that they have to show that the debtor, all right, the person that had owed them money, that's going to reduce by €4,000 because the debtor has paid them 1,000, but then they're never going to pay them the other 3,000, which is 75 cents in the euro in respect of a debt of €4,000. So they're not going to pay them 75%. That's bad debts written off. €3,000 there, which goes into selling and distribution expenses, and the debtors, we minus 4,000 there. Then number 3, a cheque issued to an advertising firm for €560 had not been presented for payment by the 31st of the 12th. So we have here €560 is a cheque issued to advertising firm, hasn't been presented for payment. The bookkeeper has given it to the advertising firm, but they just haven't gone into the bank and presented it. When they do, this bank overdraft figure is going to increase by €560. So we should have the same bank figure here, €47,250 overdraft, and that's your bank figure. How's this going to look in the accounts then? You've got your bank overdraft, 50,000 minus 1,750 minus 1,000, 47,250. You've got investment income due, you've got the amount that you're due to get for the year, minus what you've received, 1,750. And then you've got debtors, minus €4,000. And then you've got bad debts written off in the selling and distribution expenses, €3,000 there. That's that one. So 2013, another manufacturing account, we have Marjam Limited. So it says in note 6, the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's bank account. However, a bank statement dated 31st the 12th, 2012 has arrived showing an overdraft of €39,720. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a cheque for €680 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger as €860. Number 2, a credit transfer of €800 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 20 cents in the €1. And then number 3, a cheque for fees €300 issued to a director has not yet been presented for payment. Okay, so let's get started. So the bank account, so the bookkeeper's bank account, it is 41,000 here on the credit side. Then the AIB bank statement figure shows an overdraft of 39,720 overdraft. So we need to get these two bank figures to reconcile. We need to get them to be the same, and hopefully when we work through everything, they will be. So number 1, a cheque for €680 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger as €860. So we've got what should have happened here was €680 should have come out of the bank, and then the creditor should have reduced by €680. So that's not what happened. What happened by mistake was that they put it in as €860. So €860 coming out of the bank, and then €860 reducing the creditor there. So to fix it then, we need to put €180 on the debit side of the bank, and then €180 on the credit side of the creditor. And that's how we'll fix it. It was the bookkeeper that totally messed this up. So it's the bookkeeper's bank figure that needs to be adjusted. So nothing will happen in the bank. They don't know about the mistake. They don't care about the mistake. It's got nothing to do with them. So what will happen then in the bookkeeper's bank figure? The overdraft, as this is money, this is coming into the bank, the overdraft will reduce by 180 and the creditor will increase by 180. Then number 2, a credit transfer of €800 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 20 cents in the €1. So paid directly into the firm's bank account. So therefore that means AIB knows about that. Okay, so we've nothing to do in their account. €800 came into the bank, so that is going to reduce the overdraft figure by €800. So let's read it again and think what else we have to do. So credit transfer of 800 paid directly into the firm's bank account, that's grand. So on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. Okay, so this €800 represents a first and final payment of 20 cent in the €1. So the other 80 cent in the euro, the business is never going to get. So that's going to be bad debts. So we're going to reduce the debtor by the whole amount, the €800 and the 3,200 bad debts written off. So €800 coming into the bank on the debit side, 3,200 on the debit side of bad debts account because that's an expense, and then the debtor, the asset debtor, is going to be credited €4,000 there, and that's that. Number 3, a cheque for fees €300 issued to a director had not yet been presented for payment. So again, the bookkeeper needs to enter this right into her account, or sorry, the bookkeeper has sent the cheque, she doesn't need to enter it into her accounts again, she's already done it. It doesn't say that she hasn't entered it or anything like that, so nothing needs to be done in the bookkeeper's books. But when the director goes into AIB and presents that cheque for €300, that is going to increase the overdraft figure. So in total then, the bank figure is going to be €40,020 overdraft. So €40,020 overdraft there in both of them. So this is how it's going to look. In the bank account here, in the creditors minus 1 year, you've got 41,000 minus 180 minus 800 is 40,020. Your creditor, you've got plus 180. Your debtor, you minus 4,000, and your bad debts written off over in your selling and distribution, 3,200, and that's you. 2012 then, we have company account West Limited. So the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's own records. So firm's bank account. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th 2011 has arrived showing an overdraft of 31,280. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a cheque for 640 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger, as €460. Number 2, a credit transfer of €900 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 30 cent in the €1. And number 3, a cheque for fees €1,000 issued to a director had not yet been presented for payment. Okay, so let's take a look then. So we have bank on the credit side, 33,000 overdraft, and we have overdraft on AIB's bank statement, 31,280 euro there. So the comparison of both has shown the following discrepancies. So a cheque for 640 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger, as €460. So let's take a look at what it should have been. So we should have had 640 coming out of the bank and then 640 being reduced by the creditor. Now it went in as 460 instead of 640. So to fix it, we're going to add 180 to this already figure here to get us up to 640, and that is what we need to do. Now it was the bookkeeper that made the mistake. AIB doesn't care about it, they don't know about it, they will never know about it, and so we don't have to adjust them. But if we credit the bank 180, that's another 180 coming out of the bank. That's going to increase the bank overdraft figure, and then the creditor is going to reduce by €180 there. Number 2, a credit transfer of €900 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 30 cent in the €1. So paid directly into the bank don't need to be adjusted, right? Because they know that has come in. So it's the bookkeeper that didn't put this into the accounts yet. So a credit transfer of 900 coming into the bank is going to reduce the bank overdraft. So that's going to minus the bank overdraft there. Now, the debtor, okay, is going to reduce by the 100 cent in the €1. So the debtor is going to reduce by the 100%. So it'll reduce by the 900 they've paid, and then the 2,100 that they're never going to pay because they're gone bankrupt. So the debtor is going to reduce by 100 cent in the €1 to €3,000 because they've paid 900 and then they're never going to pay 2,100. So the 2,100 is going to be bad debts written off, which is obviously not great news for the business. Then we have a cheque for fees, number 3, €1,000, issued to a director, had not yet been presented for payment. So again, the bookkeeper knew about this, don't have to do anything in their accounts, but when the cheque is presented for payment, it is going to be added to the AIB overdraft, so the overdraft that they know about. So then overall then we've got €32,280 overdraft there. How's it going to look in the accounts then? We've got our overdraft here, 33,000 plus 180 minus 900. Then we have creditor minus 180. We've got debtors minus 3,000, and we have bad debts written off, 2,100 in the selling and distribution expenses. And that is that year done. Now, 2007, it's important to note that there was a typo in that year's adjustment, and it doesn't say anywhere that there was a typo, but even in the market scheme, if you have a look, the figure that they use to reconcile it isn't the 43,560. So this is very confusing for students, but that figure there should have been €42,760. So if anything like that ever happens, the superintendent in the exam hall will say, okay, let me bring your attention to this, and they will say what the figure should be. So don't worry about that. If there is a mistake in the exam and you don't get notified of it, the marking scheme is going to go your way. They're going to be throwing marks away because they've made the mistake. So never worry about that. Okay, so note 6. The figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's bank account. However, a bank statement dated 31st of the 12th, 2006 has arrived showing an overdraft of 43,560, which, as you know, should have been 42,760. A comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, a cheque for 690 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger as 760. Number 2, a credit transfer of 750 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 30 cent in the €1. And number 3, a cheque for fees, €400, issued to a director had not yet been presented for payment. Okay, so that is that. So let's have a look. So the bank figure here, 44,000 on the overdraft side, so 44,000 overdraft, and then AIB bank statement figure, as you know, should have been 42,760. Right, so looking at the first one, a cheque for 670 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger as 760. Okay, so let's take a look. So the bookkeeper messed up here. All right, so the bookkeeper should have put 670 on the credit side of bank and 670 on the debit side of creditors. Okay, so that's what should have happened, but what happened by mistake, they put 760 instead of 670. So that is the crack there. To fix that then, what they should have done, or what they need to do, is put 90 on the debit side of bank and then 90 on the credit side of creditor. So the bank don't need to know that the bookkeeper made this mistake. It's nothing got to do with them at all. They don't care. We will put 90 into the bank. So 90 coming into the bank is going to reduce the overdraft by €90. And the creditor, we add €90 to the creditor. So that's number 1. Number 2, a credit transfer of 750 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 30 cent in the €1. So a credit transfer paid directly into the bank account. The bank know about this. Okay, so the bank know about this. So we don't need to do anything in the bank's account. Now, credit transfer of 750 coming into the bank account is going to reduce the overdraft figure. Okay, and this represents a first and final payment of 30 cent in the €1. So the debtor has paid them the 750, but they're not going to pay them, which represents 30 cent in the €1, they're not going to pay them the other 70 cent. So we're going to have to say debtors minus the 100%, which is 750 and 1,750. 1,750 is 30 cent in the €1. Okay, so that is how that's going to look there. And then number 3, a cheque for fees €400 issued to a director had not yet been presented for payment. So the bookkeeper wrote the cheque, they know about it, it doesn't say that they didn't record it anywhere, so they've nothing to do in their books. But the bank, when that cheque for 400 comes into the bank with the director, they take it out of their back pocket, they put it into their account or they cash it or whatever, that is going to increase that overdraft by €400. So overall then you've got €43,160 overdraft, and that is you done. So how's it going to look in the accounts? We've got the bank overdraft 44,000 minus 90 minus 750 is your 43,160. Your creditors, we will add €90 to the trial balance figure. Your debtors, you will minus 2,500 from the trial balance figure, and your bad debts written off in your selling and distribution expenses is going to be 1,750. And that is that. In 2004, Kerry Limited, it is adjustment number 5. So the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's bank account. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2003 has arrived showing a credit balance of 4,040. Now, a credit balance means a positive figure. So the bank works the opposite way around that we work. So our debit balance in the bank means that's a positive figure, but the bank works the opposite way around. So credit balance means that we actually have 4,040 in the bank account. So a comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, investment income 2,700 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account. Number 2, a cheque for €780 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger as €870. Number 3, a credit transfer of €750 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 30 cent in the €1. And number 4, a cheque for fees €6,000 issued to a director had not yet been presented for payment. Okay, so looking at the trial balance, our bank figure is 5,500 on the credit side, which means that's an overdraft. And then we have a positive figure of 4,040 in the bank account statement. So this will be funny because we're going to be plussing and minus in different ways here, because this is an overdraft while this is a positive figure. So we have to be very careful whether we plus and minus here. So let's get started. Number 1, investment income 2,700 had been paid direct into the firm's bank account. So direct into the firm's bank account, AIB know about that. It was paid directly into them. If investment income 2,700 was paid into the bank account, that's going to reduce the overdraft figure by 2,700. Then what other accounts are affected? That is going to be investment income due. I'm going to record that I have received 2,700 into the investment income account. So it's going to help me establish the investment income due. So that's number 1 done. Number 2, a cheque for €780 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, cash book and ledger as €870. So the bookkeeper completely made a mistake here. They messed up. The bank don't know about this mistake and they don't care. So what should have happened? The cheque for 780 would have left the business's bank account and it would have reduced the debt to the creditor by 780, but they put it in as 870 instead. So to fix that then, we'll put 90 on the debit side of bank and 90 on the credit side of creditor. So nothing will happen in the bank account there, in the bank's bank figure, but the bookkeeper's bank figure, it will reduce the overdraft by 90, because that's 90 coming into the bank, will reduce the overdraft figure. And in the other accounts, we will increase the creditor by €90 there. Number 3, a credit transfer of €750 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a debtor who has recently been declared bankrupt. This represents a first and final payment of 30 cents in the €1. Okay, so credit transfer of $750 paid directly into the firm's bank account. So paid directly into AIB. AIB already know, it already is included in this 4,040. So when we get the bookkeeper to record it, then $750 coming into the bank is going to reduce the bank overdraft figure by $750. Now, they've recently been declared bankrupt. This $750 is all the business is going to get, and it represents the 30 cents in the €1. So the 70 cents in the €1 is bad debts written off. Okay, so $750 divided by 30 multiplied by 70 is going to be your bad debts written off, $1,750. The debtor is going to reduce by $2,500, which is the money that they paid the business and the money that they're never going to pay the business, the $1,750. So that is number 3 done. Number 4 then, a cheque for fees, €6,000 issued to a director had not yet been presented for payment. So again, the bank don't know about this. The bookkeeper knows about this because they issued the cheque to the director for $6,000. It doesn't say that they haven't entered it in their account, so we can cross all that off. We've nothing to do there. When the director goes into the bank and presents that cheque to the bank teller and gets it paid into his or her account or gets it cashed or whatever, that's going to reduce the bank account figure by 6,000. So we would minus the 6,000 there. Overall then, we've got €1,960 overdraft in both. So 1,960 overdraft in both. And that is the 2004 one done. So again, very interesting that you had an overdraft for the bookkeeper and then that you had a positive figure for the bank. And remember, a credit balance on a bank statement means actually a positive balance. If you were in the exam and you didn't know that, these wouldn't equal. So you know you've gone wrong somewhere, and maybe you'd figure out then that that was positive 4040 instead of minus 4040. But anyway, expect to see that. So how's it going to look in the account? So you're going to have your bank is going to be 5500 overdraft minus 2,700 minus 90 minus 750. The investment income is you're going to have investment income due, the amount for the year minus 2,700. The creditor, in the creditor's minus 1 year, you're going to have the trial balance figure and you're going to add the €90 here. And then debtor, you're going to minus 2,700 and you're going to have bad debts written off in the selling and distribution 1,750. And that is that. Now, 2002 then, it was number 2. So this is the last one. So the figure for bank in the trial balance has been taken from the firm's bank account. However, a bank statement dated the 31st of the 12th, 2001 has arrived showing a credit balance of €430. So again, with the credit balance, that actually means that that is a positive figure. Okay, and look up here, this is an overdraft. So this is another one of those to test us, just like the last one. So a comparison of the bank account and the bank statement has revealed the following discrepancies. Number 1, investment income €4,000 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account. Number 2, a cheque for €960 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, the cash book and ledger, as €690. Number 3, a credit transfer of €600 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account on behalf of a bankrupt debtor. This represents a first and final payment of 20 cents in the €1. And 4, a cheque issued for 3,500 to a director had not yet been presented for payment. Okay, so let's get going. So again, just take note that 7,400 is on the credit side in the bookkeeper's bank figure, which means it's an overdraft. And as I said, a credit balance of 430 on a bank statement figure actually means that that is a positive bank figure. So they work the opposite way than we do. So number 1, investment income €4,000 had been paid direct to the firm's bank account. So the bank know about this, nothing's going to happen in the bank, but €4,000 is going to be paid into the firm's bank account. So that's going to reduce the overdraft figure there by €4,000. What other accounts are we going to enter stuff into? Well, that will help us establish how much investment income is actually due. So we're going to have the amount for the year minus the €4,000 that has been received. And that is that. Number 2, a cheque for €960 issued to a supplier had been entered in the books, the cash book and the ledger as €690. So what should have happened is that the cheque issued to the supplier should reduce the bank by €960 and should have reduced the supplier, the creditor, by €960. But they put it in as €690 instead of €960. Then to fix that, then we have to put €270 on the credit side of the bank and then €270 on the debit side of creditor. Okay, so that's that done. So we will do nothing in AIB's account because they didn't make a mistake. It was the bookkeeper that made the mistake. So to this overdraft then we'll add the €270 because they're going further into overdraft because that's money out of the bank. Then the creditor, we will minus €270 from the creditor. Number 3, a credit transfer of €600 had been paid direct to a firm's bank account on behalf of a bankrupt debtor. This represents a first and final payment of 20 cents in the €1. So, credit transfer of €600 paid directly into the firm's bank account. AIB know about that, the bookkeeper doesn't. Alright, so €600 coming into the bank is going to reduce the bank overdraft figure. Now, that €600 was a bank payment in behalf of a bankrupt debtor. This represents a first and final payment of 20 cents in the €1. So we have to reduce the debtor by the 100% or the 100 cents in the €1 because they've paid us 600 and they're not going to pay us the 2,400. So that is bad debts written off. Okay, so bad debts written off, 2,400 debtor minus 3,000. And that's it. So if we think about it in T accounts, we've got 600 debit side of bank, we've got 3,000 credit side of debtor, and we've got 2,400 debit side of bad debts because that's an expense. So we equal out there. Then part 4, a cheque issued for 3,500 to a director had not yet been presented for payment. So the bookkeeper has entered it all. They've written the cheque, okay? They've got nothing else to do. It doesn't say they didn't enter anything. But when this director goes into AIB and takes 3,500 cheque from their pocket and lodges it or cashes it or whatever, that is going to reduce the positive bank figure of 430 by 3,500. So overall then you've got €3,070 bank overdraft in both. And that is that. And that's it done. So they're all the bank adjustments. We'll look at just how we finish this off. So bank here, 7,400 minus 4,000 plus 270 minus 600. We've got investment income due, the amount for the year, minus the 4,000 investment income that's been received. We have creditor, the trial balance figure, minus 270. We have the debtor, the trial balance figure, minus 300. And then we have bad debts written off, 2,400 in the selling and distribution expenses. And that is everything done for that. And that's the bank adjustment. So again, you can't get the bank figure wrong.